Ready?
1 second.
It's a recording.
It's recording.
Hello, good evening from a windy Radina Studios. We're back, mic to mic, face to face, toe to toe. I'm James Christie, and welcome to my colleague David Radina as well. We're going to be discussing tonight Corona tournaments, the ones which have been a hit and the ones which haven't, the ones which are close to home and the ones further afield, the ones non-controversial and the ones very controversial.
All right then, so we're back together, Jim.
Episode 13.
Yes, episode 13.
Unlucky for some.
Finally, face-to-face. Good mics, no more Skypes and Discords and etc. online. Are you happy to be back here?
It's nice to see you within touching distance. That is good. Zoom is lovely, but like methadone's no substitute for heroin, Zoom's no substitute for face-to-face contact in the studio.
Exactly. We're back to basics. No guests for our show today.
Well, yeah, a quick news roundup of things, including the slight return of the British Tennis Championships. I want to mention an article in The Guardian too about the best female tennis players of the last 50 years. And then we're going to talk about something else, aren't we, for the main part of the programme?
All right, so let's go for it. British tennis, it's Jim's speciality, and he's going to kick it off. And I will be here kind of, following, making questions. I don't know much, even though I live in the UK. But Jim will be...
I promise, David, it will be brief. But it's something I feel quite passionate about because Britain had national tennis championships up to and including 2002, where it invited all the top men's players and female players too. And I think doubles, maybe not wheelchair, to take part in the national championships. I think it was a knockout tournament of all the top players, anyone who wanted to take part, and a winner was crowned. And some of the top players did take part for many years, Tim Henman and Greg Ruseski, but they stopped playing about 1997 when they had big commitments on the tour. They were both top 10 players themselves.
So was it part of the ATP?
No, it was separate. There were no ranking points. But it might have been that to get a wild card for Wimbledon, one of the ways into getting a wild card was doing well in the national championships.
And this was in 2002?
It went up to 2002 and then it stopped.
And professional players and non-professional, or everyone professional?
I think it was open invitation. Whereas the recent tournament organised by Jamie Murray was an exhibition, which was just 8 male tennis players in the kind of same format as the ATP end of season thing.
World Tour
two groups of 4, semi-finals, final. I suppose the big difference being a champions tiebreak in the third set, rather than the full Monty as the ATP Tour Championships had.
So that disappeared, that tournament?
It disappeared. The official reason was a lack of interest. The BBC stopped showing coverage of it, I think, when Henman and Ruseski stopped playing. So there was a huge gulf between Henman, Ruseski and the rest of the pack. Henman and Ruseski were floating around the top 10, top 20, top 30 for half a dozen years or so. Whereas the next lot of players, they were outside the top 200s. There was probably less interest in it, but I thought it was a real shame when it finished because I think each nation should have their national championships. It gives something to aim for. Maybe you're not Henman or Ruseski, but wouldn't it be a great achievement to meet someone down a pub in years from now and say, I won the national championships? So that's a real claim to fame, I think.
So you mean, so there would be a competition to see who would qualify? Semi-professionals and professionals? How big is this qualification?
Well, I suppose any ranked player in Great Britain can participate in it. That's how the tournament was formed. And the last person who won it was a player called Alex Bogdanovic.
Never heard.
Who I think he was a record-breaking player at Wimbledon. I think he was given a wild card 7 years in a row and got knocked out in the first round 7 years in a row. But he was actually quite a talented player if you looked at him. He just froze on the big occasion. He was the last official winner of it. The ladies' winner was Anne, I can't pronounce this, help me out here if you know her, Anna Kavothakang, who I think is is the captain of the Ladies Federation Cup team. But then they stopped it, and I'd really like to see it come back. I think every country needs its own national championships to foster a bit of competition. You could always say, look, the reward for winning this is a wild card into the Grand Slams if you're one of the nations who host a Grand Slam. And I think it was really good to come back. And from a semi-jokey point of view, if it carries on and Murray's too busy to play, Dan Evans is too busy to play because they're top-ranked players, then it gives a British player a chance to win a tournament, which is quite a rarity. So I'm all in favour of it coming back.
And where would you put it?
Where would I put it in the calendar?
Mm-hmm.
Very good question. I suppose I'd put it near the ATP End of Tour Championships because they're going from London this year. I think it's going to be last year, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
So there's a gap in the London sporting calendar for that. I don't think they could fill the O2, especially if Murray was unlikely to play in it. But, you know, somewhere like the Albert Hall, which is a lovely venue, maybe combine it with the Veterans Tournaments. McEnroe, Guy Forget, Pat Cash, they all play in London around December. So why not have them back to back so you could promote one on the back of the other?
So this would be a tournament where the top
great British players
would not be part of, or would they be part of?
What, the national championships?
Yes.
There'd be a cut-off point, so you probably have maybe the top 32 if it was going to be a knockout tournament. So that the top 32 British players who wanted to enter would enter. And you'd probably, you know, get players ranked from anywhere from 50 in the world down to about 700 or 800.
So there would be, for those that are not participating in the biggest tournaments in the ATP and the WTA, those would be qualifying for this tournament few months prior to this tournament.
I don't think there'd be any qualification. I think it would just be if you're ranked in the top 32 and you want to enter, then you're in there.
And it's a week tournament.
Yeah, just a week-long tournament. I think would be, really, really good for them.
You know, I like the idea of each country having like a national official tennis tournament. I wouldn't mind that as long as the calendar, which is already so filled up, the tennis calendar would allow it. True. I think it's a great idea. So it happened, it came back, but because of the virus, do you think it's going to be possible without the lockdown and when the world is back to normal?
Well, that's the key thing. When Andy Murray is busy and, you know, can get on an aeroplane more freely, he's the big draw. So I think you have to assume that he won't be taking part. Dan Evans, if he's top 50, maybe Kyle Edmonds. So it'll be something for the tennis nerds and anoraks. It's not going to get your man down the pub demanding that the barmaids change the channel over from the Premier League to watch it.
Yes.
But it's still a worthwhile tournament, I think, for, you know, giving British tennis players a target. And I think the same for all nations. They should all have their own tournament.
Yes. So if you had to guess now, would you say 2021, this tournament is going to happen again?
No, knowing the LTA, they will bollocks it up. They've, can I say that word on the UFE? They'll find a way not to do it because the tournament that Jamie Murray organised, you know, that didn't get the official moniker of British National Championships. Yeah, I haven't got great confidence in them. They've taken some very strange decisions over the years, so sadly no, but that's why I'm bringing it up. If I had confidence they would, I wouldn't be so passionate about talking about it.
So you, Jim, you followed this British tournament that just finished, a few weeks ago?
About it.
Can you tell us what happened?
I tried to recommend it to you and send you WhatsApp messages urging you to watch it, but you were washing your hair, so you couldn't.
I couldn't do it.
Couldn't watch it, not wash it.
I couldn't wash it,
which is unfortunate. I videoed it all for you. I've got the
thank you.
Got the tapes at home.
So how did it
But
went?
It was good. It was good. There were some scrappy matches at first, but Andy Murray played very well. He lost to Kyle Edmonds in the group stage, but it was close, 3 sets. Then he lost to Dan Evans in the semi-final from a set-up. But he was giving the world number 28. He was just giving him the runaround. But then Dan Evans stormed back and did really well and beat Kyle Edmonds in the final. But
who won it?
Dan Evans, yeah. But they were picking their own balls up. They had coaches on the court, and the coaches would be actually interviewed by a headpiece in between the games. They were sitting away from the players at the changeover, and they'd be interviewed by the TV pundits, which didn't really work for me. I thought, these coaches don't want to give away their secrets in between the thing. But it has made me come round to the idea more that coaches should sit with the players during changeovers and we should be able to hear what they're saying. But I don't like the coaches being interviewed by themselves at the changeover.
Wow, so you would bring coaching... That's a rule change, by the way.
I've changed my mind. My mind. I think, I'm in favour of it. Maybe not for the Grand Slams just yet, but I think it should be investigated more on the...
Because you've seen it happen in this tournament, you enjoyed it.
Well, yeah, in this tournament it was similar. They were actually interviewing the coach by themselves at the changeover. And sometimes the player by themselves would be interviewed on the headpiece while they were sitting down at the changeover, which was a bit intrusive. So I would like instead to be able to hear what the coach is saying to the player at the changeover, and the coach sit with the player at the changeover. What about yourself? Are you in favour of this idea?
So I can relate to the tournament you're talking about because I watched another tournament. The world is now coming up with different tournaments in the time of lockdown, friendly tournaments, all of them. And it was the Ultimate Tennis Showdown. You heard about it? Yes,
didn't I recommend
with the new rules.
I recommended it to you.
Yes, you did.
I did.
It was you, and I watched it on Eurosports as well.
Yeah. And which players did you see?
I watched Berrettini. Dustin Brown was there, although he didn't do very well. Goffin was there.
He was awful.
It's a shame because that guy.
I would have thought it would suit him.
Yes, I watched Tim as well. He was there. And this tournament was a bit different because it had different rules and special cards.
Explain briefly some of the rules.
So it was kind of like inspired on the basketball structure, which is quarters instead of sets.
Yeah.
And each quarter had 10 minutes, and so there was a timer. And when time was up, the last point was going to be the last point, and whoever was the player with most points that quarter would win the quarter. It was best of 5 quarters.
So was there a clock watch thing so they didn't take too long serving?
There was a clock watch of, I think, 15 seconds, very quick. It gave players very little time, exactly, because if there's a clock already, you're not here to waste time.
Yeah.
But I mentioned this tournament because it had the same structure when it comes to coaching. If a player was really having a bad moment, the coach or the player itself could call a timeout, 1 per quarter.
1 per quarter, yeah.
And then you were listening to the conversation between the coach and the player.
Did you hear anything interesting?
Yes. I wouldn't say one thing in particular, but I've noticed the dynamics between coaches. And some coaches and player relationships are very good. They understand each other. He listens to the coach and everything is okay. Whereas some other players, it felt like there was no chemistry between the coach. One example, Tsitsipas and his father. Tsitsipas would not even listen to his father. No words, nothing. The father would speak.
Another example, Zverev and Becker.
Zverev and Becker in the beginning of the year, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's interesting. In the tournament I watched, you could hear Murray's coach say to him, grunts more. And I've always said it does help you. If you're struggling with your timing, if you grunt when you hit the ball, it's a reminder, get that timing right. And he started playing better after he was told to grunt more.
Wow.
So, I think it is an interesting thing. But you enjoyed the Ultimate Tennis, and we're going to play a game, aren't we?
We are.
Before the next episode.
We are.
So actually
we're going to apply those rules.
Because I think that the ultimate test of a new form of tennis is, can you do it down the public tennis courts? And I think it's going to be a struggle with the old timer and all the rules.
I'm going to bring an alarm clock.
I'm going to bring a rule book.
Oh, yes. Because we didn't mention, but this Ultimate Tennis had 2 cards that you could use every quarter.
Right.
Which was still a serve. 2 serves card.
How does that work?
Card. So at any moment, if it's your opponent to serve, you can steal a serve. But my favorite was at any time during the quarter, you felt that it was time, you could use a card where if you hit a winner with a volley, with a baseline shot, or with a serve, you get 3 points. And that's why I want to play it. Because it's really fun.
If you hit a winner, is that an outright winner? Or is that
outright?
So when you hit the ball and your opponent doesn't get a racket to it.
Yes. Yeah. So that got me excited. If there was no card, I think I wouldn't really even bother to play. But I want my winner to be valued at 3 points.
It's a good idea. So an ace would count as
ace would count,
3 points.
Yeah, it was a fun idea. I liked it. But now let's go back to the British tournament. Was there prize money?
No, this was for charity.
For charity.
So,
How did they make money? There's no fans?
well, it was televised, so they must have got some TV rights for it to kind of undercover it. It might have been the LTA, the Lawn Tennis Association, also provided some money because it's good for the British players to keep in practice there. So they probably broke even, and they probably managed to pay the travelling accommodation expenses of the players and the coaches. But in terms of profits from the TV rights, I would imagine that would have gone to charity. It would have been a modest donation because there can't have been very much because there were no spectators there.
Yes, no spectators. In the ultimate tournament, they put sound effects of the crowd.
Did that work? Because it doesn't work in football. I really opposed to that in football.
It's a bit weird, yes. Although from watching on TV perspective, it really sounded normal. It was not weird. But maybe being there as a player, listening to the sound effects when he hit a winner or missed a point or whatever it was that he did, I think, yeah, it might sound...
You think the players could hear the sound effects too?
I don't know.
Wow.
It's a good question. They definitely heard the quarter clock sound. When the time was over, there was a sound.
Were there any arguments?
No, players were playing in good spirits.
They took
Nobody
it seriously, but
nobody really was aggressive towards each other. They were there in good spirits. It was not about winning or losing. It was about playing tennis. And I watched some players scream at themselves and be angry, but that's the
Gasquet
emotion
was
of...
playing, wasn't he? He was playing well.
Gasquet was playing, Tsitsipas and other players.
Good
All right.
stuff.
So, anything else you want to add about the British topic?
Well, before that, I just really want to briefly bring up another news item. I was reading in the Guardian newspaper yesterday. They had a list of the top female players of all time since 1970, since the Open era. They kind of nominated it and readers would vote on it. And among the nominees were Steffi Graf, Serena Williams, Justine Henin-Ardenne, who won 7 Grand Slams titles, Monica Seles, Billie Jean King. I do like these listings. The list was the greatest, and then readers would kind of vote and have their contributions. And I did notice that someone with 24 Grand Slam titles was left off the list. Now, I don't know if you've heard of her.
Of the
David.
best player of all time?
And yes, and she won, I think, 16 of her titles before 1970, but she won 8 of her titles after 1970. She also won 40 doubles titles, Grand Slam doubles titles.
Okay.
40.
That's pretty impressive.
And she was left off the list. Do you know her name? She's quite controversial. A court in Australia is named after her.
Margaret Court.
Yes, Margaret Court. And she was left off the list and she was not mentioned at all. And I just found it staggering. And you probably know why she's left off the list, though they didn't say why.
Because of her controversy.
I would guess. They didn't say that. But how do you feel about that? Should she be on the list?
I definitely think she has to. There's you as a person and there's you as a tennis player. And I think maybe she was not mentioned because it was a vote by the public and people don't like her because of her ideas.
Yeah, I think it was like a lot of these polls, the names are suggested first. So it's not an open list. And then the readers have to vote from it. So it was really the Guardian journalists who drew up the shortlist. Margaret Court has views on homosexuality and lesbianism, which I don't agree with at all. They're awful. And John McEnroe and Martina Navratilova have protested against that at the last Australian Open. Billie Jean King has too. But how far can you whitewash history just because someone has unpleasant views which don't chime with your own? I mean, she won those titles. It wasn't like she won them because she was a drugs cheat, in which case I could understand her being whitewashed from history and her achievements don't count. But she still won them fair and square. So I just thought I'd mention it because it didn't sit right with me that she was left off the list or not mentioned.
I'm with you.
Of it. And the embarrassing thing when the vote happened, who was voted?
That was going to be my next question.
Okay, who do you think?
Who won it?
Yeah, who won the readers' vote?
Man, I would say Serena Williams, I suppose.
Well, that's a good guess because she's won 23. Margaret Court's won 24.
He wasn't.
Steffi Graf.
How many slams does she have?
Well, less than Serena Williams, obviously. Yeah. It's close, but I mean, she hasn't won as many. It's quite hard to argue for her, I think, as the greatest compared to Serena. But I think that as with a lot of these greatest lists, people vote for their favourite player, not the player who they think is the greatest in terms of achievements. You know, Pete Sampras, I didn't particularly like him as a player, but I'd have to admit, He was probably a greater player than Agassi, who is more my favourite player.
Yes. 22 slams for Steffi Graf, by the way.
22.
That's
That's
pretty
amazing,
impressive.
yeah.
Okay, maybe she deserves to be there. Because she was already part of the new era of tennis, which is harder than the old era. And she still capitalized 22.
Well, that's a question for another podcast, I think, which we haven't really delved into women's tennis too much. Fascinating subject. But was Steffi Graf's era tougher than Serena Williams' era? The big thing about Steffi Graf's era is Monica Seles was doing very well until a deranged fan stabbed her.
Yes.
History might have been different.
So much.
But that wasn't Steffi Graf's fault.
That was a sad moment, that one.
Yeah.
The only person to blame is the mad fan.
And he got what he wanted, which was to get Steffi Graf back to world number one.
He was his mission. Anyway. Wow, I'm very impressed with Steffi Graf being... Maybe she had more fans than I thought.
Yeah, very popular player.
So did they do this poll for men as well, or was it just women?
That's coming up, so you can vote on that. There is still time to vote on the
I tell
greatest
you
men,
who's win.
which we've done already on UFEs.
We did, and I tell you who's people going to vote for.
Absolutely.
I'm sure it's going to be Federer.
Dan Evans. Oh, Federer, yes, of course. Yes.
That's a good joke. I think probably the love for Federer is blind, so they're not even going to
some of
think
these
twice.
polls get sabotaged and people will vote for people like Dan Evans, very good player though he is.
Yes. Now, I have some other thing I wanted to ask you about.
Of course.
I'm very curious to what you're going to say. So you've heard about the Adria Tour?
How could I not have? Absolutely.
Was Djokovic's tournament an idea?
And Ivanisevic.
And Ivanisevic, thank you for completing that.
Djokovic, his coach.
Exactly. And it was an interesting thing that happened because I heard that Djokovic was defending that we now should start getting together and...
Before the tournament,
correct me if I'm wrong, and encouraging, and players was actually shaking the hand, on contrary to the British and to the Ultimate Tournament that they were hitting racket on racket at the end.
What do you do when you play people at the end of the match?
These days, racket on racket.
Racket on racket. I do the elbow bump.
Yeah, or the
I've got very sharp elbows, so I don't think everyone likes it.
I like more the racket on racket. And
I don't want to damage the racket. That's the thing.
That's true. Hey, you can hit strings on wood. I don't even know what's the material anymore of the rackets these days.
Graphite.
You know better than me.
Kryptonite.
So you heard about this. They had, first of all...
Big crowds.
There was big crowds. There was shaking hands at the end. Mm-hmm. And there was after parties.
Limbo dancing.
Yes.
Semi-naked.
And
the players.
Oh, wow. So this idea didn't end up very well, did it? Because looks like Dimitrov was infected by the coronavirus and passed on to Troitsky, was it? And then Troitsky to Djokovic, and then Djokovic to Djokovic's wife.
Djokovic's coach as well. I think there were other officials there, maybe umpires. I think at one stage it was about 40 people. So we just heard about the high-profile tennis players. Did Zverev get it or not?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
But he was supposed to be in quarantine, wasn't he?
Do you think it was a good idea or a bad idea to do this?
In Djokovic's defence, I would say in Croatia that the lockdown restrictions were such that they weren't breaking any rules in Croatia. But someone as high profile as Djokovic has to be very careful. I can appreciate he wanted to bring a bit of joy back to his home country, really, and say, look, we can enjoy ourselves. Let's celebrate. You know, we've beaten it. These restrictions are ending. It's a glorious advert for the country that I love. But my reservations are about it. For one, like there were lots of people from different nationalities playing there. Now, I can understand that at the time of Corona, if they were based in Croatia when Corona struck, and that was their training base and they were there anyway. But they must have travelled from there to take part. And I know certainly a lot of them travelled to other European countries afterwards. For instance, team went to France after that. And it's just a wake-up call, really, because if that happens in the US Open... So it has a big knock-on effect. The umpire who umpired Djokovic before he catches it. It's a real wake-up call. And
Djokovic being the president of the Players Committee.
Yes, he is.
Which is even more responsibility,
yes,
isn't it?
I mean, it's unfortunate because he is trying to take a part in tennis, which is great. He could just take the prize money, but he's trying to be an ambassador for tennis.
Yes.
But with that responsibility and privilege comes the pressure of you've got to be whiter than white, really. His apology wasn't seen as being good enough.
Did he apologize for his idea? I didn't know about that.
He did, but it was seen by some as not being fulsome enough, so then he issued a second apology, and, he's really sorry for all the people he hurt. And it's unfortunate in that he has quite a lot of unorthodox views about health and vaccines anyway.
Yes, and it doesn't help that he's normally the villain, isn't it? When it comes to Federer versus him or Nadal versus him.
And David, have you seen the interviews he's been doing with this guy about his beliefs and stuff on YouTube? I think over Corona too.
Yes.
He's got some left field views, and who's to say in 20 years' time we'd all watch them and go, my God, the man was right all along about his PR company, if they have any say over it, should be saying, don't do these interviews. It's just making you seem a bit of a loony, and you got a reputation anyway.
Yeah.
Sad, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I like Djokovic.
Yeah, same here.
As a player and as a person. He is definitely feels that he's a person that is trying to always evolve and become a better person all the time. He's having these psychological wars by himself and trying to grow from them. And just a few years ago, hired a new coach and even a guru advisor. And I understand his point of view. He's going through, feels like, I cannot speak for him, so it feels like he's going through, his transformation as a human being. And he's trying to be open about it. Blunt, open, clear. And maybe that's why the videos are coming out and he's very free to talk about it.
Yes.
But yes, there are consequences when you live in a world that is very complex and full of different ideas and opinions about what is and what's not. So my question here, and I bounce back to you, is do you think there will be consequences to Djokovic as the president of the Players Committee and on his progress on getting more fans and being more loved?
Yes, definitely in the short term. You've got people like Kyrgios coming out saying what you've done is boneheaded, and that's just what a player is saying in public. What they're saying in private in the locker room is probably along the same lines. A lot of them, not all of them. I'm sure he's got a lot of friends on the tour, especially amongst his own countrymen. But perhaps he'll go, well, now that this has happened, I'm a villain. I might as well be hung, drawn and quartered for a sheep just as well as a lamb. I don't know if you've heard of that expression. Basically, I can't win. So I might as well just be nasty, kind of sneer at the crowd if they're getting on my back. And it's a shame because I would like to see him embraced by tennis fans and him embrace tennis fans. I think he's got a lot to offer. We all make mistakes. He's growing up in public. Yeah, it was a bad mistake doing that tournament. We forget these young players. They're red, hot-blooded males. They want to go out and dance in nightclubs and get close to the fans. Maybe that's in normal times that's to be lauded. So yeah, I think he deserves a rap on the knuckles. But let's not tar and feather him.
Of course not. I want to make everyone that's listening clear that we have nothing against Djokovic. It's just an interesting topic to talk about because we had 3 or 4 different friendly tournaments and looks like the other tournaments did really well. The British one and the Ultimate one, they kept no fans, no touch, people using masks, even the coaches were using masks. Yeah. It was a great idea, it worked well, and it did not jeopardize anybody.
But let me ask you this, if you had the choice going back in time or watching the Adriatic tournament in glorious sunshine with the world's top players of all nationalities playing at a very high level, beautiful people in the crowd as well, or watching Andy Murray pick up his own ball in a drafty warehouse in Roehampton, which are you going to go for as a TV viewer?
Yes, not even close.
So we're part of it too, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. If I was a citizen in Serbia and there was this tournament and it's just next door to me and I had money to buy a ticket, I might have gone.
Yes. Yeah,
and
exactly.
I might have been one of the responsible ones to support this idea. But you never know what's going to happen around the corner.
Well,
so
we've all made mistakes during lockdown.
We all make mistakes, yes. I do hope that everything calms down and we forget these things and we move forward because Djokovic does not deserve to be judged for too long.
No, and maybe the Croatian authorities should take some of the blame for it as well. Maybe they should go on.
We know that the intent was not malicious.
No, it was a pure intent.
It was a pure, let's go for tennis. We love tennis. We got to get it back. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Now, one final question about this. This example is a great example for tennis. So the lockdown is slowly going down, yes? And countries are starting to open
Hopefully.
up. Jobs are starting to go back to normal, some of them. My question is, and tennis was starting to think about going back to normal. Do you think this is going to delay the real tournaments, the ATP tournaments, to come back because of this bad example?
I think hopefully the tournaments can learn from it.
Exactly.
Really, and go, okay, well, this is the danger. You know, what happens if one player does go down with it? Because all this happened really quite far into the Adriatic tournament, because it was not a tournament in itself, was it? It was a series of different tournaments.
Yes.
So I think they almost completed the one where it went down. I think Djokovic had reached the final, and then it all fell apart, really. So hopefully that will feed into the planning of Guy Forget for the French Open and for the US Open as well. And it's quite a sobering reminder that it only takes one person to go down to have a domino effect, and suddenly 7 or 8 matches are jeopardized, and you've got 7 or 8 players having to quarantine. So, yeah, I think it's a real reminder. It's still out there. It's still dangerous. There still could be a second wave. And wouldn't it be awful for tennis's image if tennis was the cause of a second wave anywhere in the world?
That would be terrible.
Because tennis has taken a knock.
Oh, my God.
Corona is a competition. There are winners and losers. There are workers who have been fine, have kept their jobs, and workers who haven't. And there have been sports who have come out of it very well, and sports which haven't. And sometimes it's a bit of luck. Sometimes your sport is a bit more resilient to Corona. You know, you can social distance and still keep the sport going. But I think that the first whiff of danger, then the tournament has to be called off. But no one wants to call a tournament off when it's already started.
Yes. So what's the first official tournament that is coming up? Is it the French Open?
I can't remember whether it's the French first. So if I go for US Open, 31st of August to 14th of September.
It has to be the US Open then.
Yeah. And the French Open is the 20th of September.
So the US Open is going to happen behind closed doors, isn't it?
That's the idea, but the French Open says it wants to operate at 50% capacity.
Oh, wow.
Which is a big difference.
It
and,
is,
you know,
but people are still going to cross each other.
The main court, Philippe Chartres at Roland Garros, that's a big bowl. That's a Roman amphitheatre. It's a massive...
Yeah.
So that's a big difference, you know, US Open behind closed doors and the French Open. No, is that extra week, it's starting a week after the US Open, is it going to make that much difference that you can suddenly half full the stadium?
It's too close. Yes, it's too close. And not only half capacity might be less people, but all those people are still going to go to the hot dog shops and buy food from the same place. So isn't that still going to be...
How are you going to clean down the seats after a big quarter-final, and then you got an hour to go till the ladies' semi-final, for instance?
When you only need 2 people to eat from the same restaurant to infect each other, 50% of the fans for French Open doesn't sound a lot more safer. Not that I'm trying to say that it's the wrong decision, but I'm just thinking...
It's a massive risk, as I've said before. If it comes off, Guy Forget and the French Tennis Federation will look like geniuses. If the slightest thing goes wrong, they're going to look very stupid, and Wimbledon will look very clever for saying no.
Not easier.
By the way, I mean, British National Tennis Championships I was talking about, why wasn't Wimbledon used for that?
True.
It's quite an interesting thing. Maybe Wimbledon said, well, we don't want to risk it, even if it is behind closed doors.
And of course, Wimbledon had international players having to travel to the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's a big difference there. But still, it's people with people. So
London, Paris, New York, they're all highly densely populated places, as goes with Grand Slam tournaments.
Yeah.
So they're all equally at risk. They're going to have a lot of travellers. US is pretty strict on quarantine, I think, isn't it? And letting people in. So
US has been the country that suffered most from cases. Over
Brazil,
1 million.
Brazil as well.
So, very interesting.
You're worrying me talking about all this, because the more you talk about it, the more I think, is it a good idea, the US Open and French Open?
But US Open said they're going to do it behind closed doors, so I'm very interested and curious of what's going to happen. One followed by the other with 1 week break, and one completely under closed doors, and the other one with 50%.
So all these players, you know, probably about 250, 300 players in both draws and the doubles, they're going to be finishing at different times in New York and then flying over to Europe to prepare for the French or go straight to the French. Will they identify whether they have or haven't got corona before they go? That's a big influx. And if you're saying that these players, if they are infected, are going to infect on average perhaps 4 or 5 people.
Yes.
You know.
And is Nadal going to participate in the French Open? Because I've been listening to...
What would you do if you were Nadal?
Well, if I was Nadal, I would participate in the French, especially
just
because...
the French, and you'd leave the US Open?
No, I would participate in all of them. But
because he's chasing that. Like Djokovic, he's chasing Federer. If it wasn't that, if it was early in their career, you know, Federer's got 12 titles, he's got 8, he might go, well, look, my legs aren't going to be up to both tournaments. I'm just going to pick and choose.
Exactly.
We haven't talked about Federer because he's having an operation, so he's going to miss... He's out for the rest of the year, isn't he?
Yeah.
So no French.
No US Open.
What a shame.
No World Tour Finals. It's a bit
tennis
sad.
Won't be the same. This is big news.
Yes, it's interesting how at almost 40, he's taking breaks still. Any other player would have said, okay, I'm going to throw in the towel. I need a big operation.
He can't though, can he?
He can't. He does not want to, and he's going to be back in 2021.
I can't help but thinking, say if Nadal won the US Open and it was exhausting and he was knackered for the French Open, Federer, you know, might just surprise people at the French Open and get to the final and not face Nadal in the final.
Yes.
And, you know, if Djokovic and team got knocked out in the shock results, every slam missed by Federer is a missed opportunity.
Although I'm going to do the boldest prediction ever. I'm think listening. In a year or two, Federer is still going to beat Nadal in the final of the French Open.
Okay, right.
Because that guy did everything except 2 things. The gold in singles at the Olympics and doing what Nadal did to him in his own turf.
Definitely,
beating him there. So,
and that would mean he would have won all of the Grand Slams at least twice.
At least twice, and beaten his nemesis in his kingdom.
And he still needs to beat Djokovic at Wimbledon.
Yes,
to make everything okay.
Aren't we?
Like a fairy tale, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, it's already a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Even without this.
Definitely, yeah.
So, yeah. Well, anyway, on that note, of course, for Federer fans, it's a good way to end it. Thank you very much for coming.
No,
Jim.
Thank you for hosting.
Finally, we are here, face to face.
Studios.
So much better. No, Bad Mojo Studios is even better.
Bad Mojo Studios.
And this is where we record some bands and stuff like that. So, and you were recorded on these studios.
Solo artists.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see each other again for the next, now no more microphones on Skypes and stuff. We're going to do
Well, hopefully not. And by the next time we speak to our viewers and our listeners, if they're not watching on YouTube, we will have maybe played Ultimate Tennis so we can feed back on whether it's a thumbs up from the gladiators or not.
Yeah.
So watch this space.
Absolutely. See you next time.
Goodbye.